During the last 3 weeks, we have been covering the Poṭṭhapāda Sutta, a powerful sutta with parts 1, 2, and 3. Initially, I thought that it would be only about 2 weeks that we could dedicate. However, it's such a demanding sutta, demanding of respect, our respect, and in terms of what it has to offer us, our practice, and putting things in perspective as it relates to what our understanding is of the Dhamma. Because over the centuries, it's only natural that people will become stale. Not the Dhamma, but the people will become stale because of our tendency to be lazy and looking for the shortcuts. Whatever we consider to be coming to us, quote unquote, air quotes, naturally, which is an overused term these days. But here, on the other hand, we have a sutta, a discourse from the longer discourses, which unfortunately do not get to be the suttas from the longer discourses, except for a very few. And even those get to be used from, have certain excerpts pulled out from them, sections. So modern day students of the Dhamma, unless they put the effort to go and really do the digging for themselves, it's really going to be kept hidden, despite the fact that the Dhamma is not hidden. Everything is in, wide open. So it's going to be an untapped resource, which is one of the reasons why I decided to do these exploration series a few years ago. And here in this sutta, Poṭṭhapāda, which this will be the 4th week that we're on with it, we see how this principle of perception, what is its role? What is its role? What is its position, importance in our understanding of the Dhamma, in what Lord Buddha taught? Most of the times, what we have in the world of understanding anything to do with religion or spiritual practice, be it individual, be it collective, doesn't matter. But we all come down to that simile. We have a role in that simile that Lord Buddha presented 2,600 years ago, and that is of the blind men and the elephant, where to amuse himself, a king and his ministers devised a plan to bring in individuals, about 50 of them, who were born blind. They were blind at birth. And to have them, and who've never met, who've never come across, who've never seen or touched an elephant, and see what their ideas would be about the elephant. So they broke, down sections in a wide area. So they brought an elephant, but they had the place sectioned off into different tents. So one group of blind men were placed in one tent, etc. So they were divided, and only a portion of the elephant's body they were allowed to touch. No one was allowed to speak to them. No one, that is, who has eyesight or who knew about elephants, what they looked like, etc. And then at the end of the day, they were called in front of the king, and the king asked them, so tell us, what do you think the elephant looks like? What is its shape? And someone said, oh, it looks like a huge vessel, container, like for grain like a, where you put a reservoir for or water or for grain. So it's huge. Why? Because they touched the belly of the elephant. They were only allowed to touch that area. And then another group of blind men interjected and they said, no, that's wrong. The elephant is a huge wide column. Because they were allowed only to touch the legs, the wide legs of the elephant. And then another group jumped in and said, no, no, no. The elephant is a moving, living trumpet. They had touched the trunk of the elephant. And another one jumped in and said, no, no, no. It's a live fan that moves and flaps around, because they had only touched the ears. So you get the point. We only pick out, as people, as individuals, as specialists, as practitioners over time, certain elements of and from the Dhamma and consider that to be it. And that is a flawed way of practice, of understanding. And unfortunately, that's what we have in the world. An arahant is someone who will go the distance, who will dig deep, who will not stop at all until they reach the other shore. To do that, they need to be curious, to understand, incessantly dig, for the sake of not just for the sake of curiosity, no, but to really seek out understanding. And that's where wisdom is, and that's what the Dhamma provides. So here we have that being unfolded again and again and again and again. Lord Buddha so far talked about the importance of virtue, which today is not talked about. Not just in Buddhism, but everywhere. He talked about the cultivation of the mind and what that means in this tradition, which, by the way, cannot happen unless there is virtue, sila. And he explained verbatim, step by step, from the shorter version to the middle version and to the longer version, as to what it is meant by sila for a practitioner. But the original question that Poṭṭhapāda, the recluse, the ascetic from another sect, as well as his followers, the 300 that had gathered in this hall of debates or debaters, their question was about perception and how can you get rid of it? Even in the higher states of jhana, of deep meditation, they knew that perception was still there. They were not able to relinquish it. First, they asked, what is perception? Lord Buddha said, it's not something that happens randomly. It's not something that comes in because of someone else injecting it into us, a god or a human or some other being. No. It is all based on causes. And last week we got to the point where Lord Buddha was explaining in detail about the jhanas and how through training, certain perceptions cease and other perceptions arise. So that is what we see here, causality. We are seeing the beauty of the Dhamma in such detail, where it's not basically some abstraction out there, some conceptual, some philosophical exercise. No. And you can see through and through Lord Buddha's compassion in sitting down with Poṭṭhapāda, just like a compassionate parent sitting down with their child or a kid, and showing them how to read the spiritual path, the Patipada. Because Lord Buddha says, not just in this sutta, but he doesn't say it in this way, in this sutta, but throughout the Nikāyas, you see this. Anupubbā sikha, anupubbā kiriya, anupubbā patipada. It is a gradual, progressional process of training, of doing, kiriya, application of oneself and one's abilities. But you cannot do it blindly. You cannot do it haphazardly. You cannot do it through some guesswork and gamble away your life, as it were. So today we reached, last time we reached perception and the self, which is a big deal. To this day, you go to India and everybody is, crazy about the self. Atman, Atman, Mahatman, Atman. Mahatman, that's the great soul, great. Brahma is seen as the great Atman. But it's an Atman, a self, nevertheless. So here we're going to see how Poṭṭhapāda really is going to bring up the knot that's stuck in his throat, basically, in his gut, in his spiritual gut. And he's going to be asking Lord Buddha this question. So then Poṭṭhapāda went on to ask yet another question. How about the self, Bhante? Is perception the same as the self found within the person? Or is perception one thing and the self of a person totally another, having nothing to do with each other? Look at Lord Buddha's response. It's not a response. There are certain questions that are answered actually, or addressed through the usage of another question to clarify as to what the other person means. This is something, by the way, modern day reporters and politicians and legal specialists hate, because basically what you do is you expose them for what they are trying to do, which is a trap. So Lord Buddha asks, what exactly do you mean by self, Poṭṭhapāda? Because so far everything was going in a nice, steady, progression. It was getting deeper and deeper and deeper, but then Poṭṭhapāda goes and brings up this whole thing about self. Some of the commentators about this sutta have said about Poṭṭhapāda, they presented a lovely image. Basically, it's like you get a hog, a wild pig, or a pig that's been rolling around in its feces and the mud and all that, and you wash it with soap, with lovely lotions and balm and all that, and then you bring it outside, and what does the pig do? Jumps back into the cesspit. That's what they describe Poṭṭhapāda to be doing at this point with this stupid question. What about the self, Bhante? Well, in the Dhamma, there's no self as such, specifically soul, because he's asking about atta. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. So he's asking, basically, he wants to know what Lord Buddha understands as the soul. This tells us about how limited his knowledge was about the Dhamma. At the very least, the Dhamma that Lord Buddha taught. So that's why Lord Buddha is asking him, what do you mean, Poṭṭhapāda, with this self thing? What are you referring to, so that I know where you're coming from? What is your idea of a self? And let's see what he's going to say. This is going to be an interesting give and take, by the way, interplay. I mean the substantial essence within the person. Substantial essence within the person, Bhante. The one that has gross form and is made up of the four great primaries. That is, sustained by consuming mouthfuls of food, basically this human body as it is. So he just said the body and the soul or the self are the same. That's the self for me. Okay? And the four great primaries are the Chatu Mahabhuta, sometimes called Mahadhatu, the four great elements, think of it. But it has to be they have to be supported by food, which comes about, by the way, first of all, through the egg from the mother and the sperm cell from a father. That's where it starts. But you need the four elements, but it has to be sustained by mouthfuls of food. Basically, he's talking about rupa as the soul, as a self. And Lord Buddha, look what he says. In that case, Poṭṭhapāda, given what this thing called a self represents for you, then perception is one thing and the self something else entirely. Here, Poṭṭhapāda, you may understand perception the way I teach and declare it in this way. So basically, don't bring in your own formulas of understanding spirituality or what this thing called a body is, or a personhood. So if I'm going to speak, I'm going to speak from the knowledge and understanding and the teaching that I share with the world. So I'm not going to talk about what you believe in, what I have experienced, Lord Buddha saying. That's what I'm sharing. So don't bring in your own methods of calculating or understanding the world when you're asking me, which is in the world a big problem, because everybody's using their own narratives to make the other person agree to the linguistic or semantic tools or narratives of their own. It doesn't work. So Lord Buddha says, so long as there is that attachment to the belief that there is some kind of a substantial essence within a person, a gross form that is made up of the four great primaries and sustained by consuming mouthfuls of food, then some perceptions will continue to arise, while some other perceptions will continue to cease. So long as you're stuck there, you're stuck in the world of perception. So don't ask me, how can you get to cease those perceptions? How can you end them? So long as you're of the belief that this is happening, that the person and the body and there's a self here, you're stuck in the trap, Lord Buddha is saying. Thus, you may understand my statement that perception is one thing and the self something else entirely. The self now, Lord Buddha is not advocating for the self. He is referring to the self that Poṭṭhapāda delineated before Lord Buddha began responding to his question. Now look what Poṭṭhapāda says. Then Poṭṭhapāda went on to say, oh, what I meant to say, Bhante, is that the self is, in fact, mind-made, complete with all its major and minor limbs and attributes, not lacking in any of its important faculties and senses. So now he changed his position. He was saying the body is the self. Now he's saying, no, Bhante, what I meant was the self is mind-made. Poṭṭhapāda, even, this is Lord Buddha's response, Poṭṭhapāda, even if the self you speak of is that of that description, still perception will remain as one thing and self as something entirely different. Here, Poṭṭhapāda, you may further try to understand perception the way I teach and declare it in this way. So long as there is that attachment to the belief that there is some kind of mind-made self. So now he's not talking about the four great primaries or four great elements or the mouthfuls of food. He's talking about mind-made, the images that we create in our mind, or in this case, astral body, you can say, and all that. So complete with all its major and minor limbs and attributes, not lacking in any of its important faculties or senses, then again, there will inevitably be some perceptions that continue to arise, while some other perceptions continue to cease. Thus, you may understand my statement that perception is one thing and the self something else entirely. Then Poṭṭhapāda replied by saying, but Bhante, what I meant to say is that the self is without form. So this is completely contradicting his earlier statement. The self is without form, utterly formless and purely made up of perception. So he's saying perception, no, that's not what I meant, Bhante. I'm sorry. Self is completely formless. Poṭṭhapāda, even if the self you speak of is formless, still perception will remain as one thing and self as something entirely different. Here, you may further try to understand perception the way I teach and declare it in this way. So long as there is that attachment to the belief that there is some kind of a self without a form, utterly formless and purely made of perception, then again, there will inevitably be some perceptions that continue to arise, while other perceptions continue to cease. Thus, you may understand my statement that perception is one thing and the self something else entirely. Then Poṭṭhapāda asked the Blessed One this question. In that case, Bhante, would you say that it is possible for me, this is where it gets interesting. In that case, Bhante, would you say that it is possible for me to come to understand how perception is one thing and the self something else entirely? Basically, do I have hope in understanding what the real thing is about the self, its perception and self? Poṭṭhapāda, I love Lord Buddha's response. It is not possible for you to understand how perception is one thing and the self is something else entirely, so long as you continue to subscribe to a different view altogether, possessing different convictions, with different predilections, practicing different teachings, and under other teachers whose belief and doctrine are quite different from what I instruct to my disciples. I wish every Buddhist practitioner, everyone who's ever read a book on Buddhist thought, everyone who wrote a book on Buddhist principles, a teacher, etc., would read that section that Lord Buddha just gave us. Because what we have today is a melange, is a mixture of different ideas and things like that. And people are putting words in Lord Buddha's mouth. But, I don't mean any disrespect there to Lord Buddha, that is. But that's what we are doing. Someone the other day asked me, what do you think about these videos? I like to listen to talks or videos that I see on YouTube where people say, this is what Lord Buddha said, or the Buddha said. What are your thoughts? Is there one that I can rely on? Like, because I see all these millions of views of these quotes. And I said, I'm sorry to say this, but most of them are just fraud. They're just different things that people have taken from different places. It's not my word for, you don't have to take my word for it. But people have done actual analysis of these things that people say the Buddha said. Here is a beautiful explanation as to where Lord Buddha and his teachings stand. So long as somebody has different convictions and belief systems and has other teachers, other traditions that speak to them, they cannot tap into the Dhamma and gain the most that the Dhamma has to offer. In fact, it will be convoluted. We know this in the ingredients that we mix up in the kitchen. You mix some ingredients that don't go together. What are you going to have? The recipe is going to be ruined. So long as you are following some other teaching, Lord Buddha says, and you have another teacher, I'm sorry, but you cannot understand my teaching. That's why you have individuals who are not even Buddhist. They come out and they write books on Buddhism. That's a laughable matter. It doesn't work. You cannot speak with the voice of that culture, because it has to have within you, the person has to have within themselves a deep, deep, deep understanding, appreciation, and a dedication of life towards that thing that they're talking about. It has to have a significance. They have to have mastered it to some degree. So now Poṭṭhapāda gave up, because it's like, okay, so I guess I'm on this front now. Now that front meant, this is Lord Buddha's dispensation, the sasana, and the other front meant every other heretical view out there in India, which basically, we're talking about 62 views primarily, and what they used to advocate or try to use as a rubric, a measuring, a yardstick, a device to see if a person is really knowledgeable in matters spiritual. They were asking these 10 questions, which we've discussed in the past, the 10 undeclared points or undetermined points, avyākata in Pali. Now, Lord Buddha had been very clear on this. He never answered them. He put them aside. That's why they're called undeclared, because they are not pertinent to the spiritual path. They have nothing to do with reality. They're simply philosophical conjurings. They're simply, a waste of time. But one that the mind loves to do because it keeps you actively engaged. And people have gone to wars, people have killed each other for these. So let's see what, again, what they are. When this was said, Poṭṭhapāda then proceeded to ask a series of other questions. In that case, Bhante, seeing that it is not possible for me to understand how perception is one thing and the self something else entirely, that is, so long as I continue to subscribe to a different view altogether, possessing different convictions, with different predilections, practicing different teachings, and under other teachers whose belief and doctrine are quite different than what the Blessed One instructs to his disciples, then I would like to know whether you declare existence to be eternal. Therefore, do you state categorically that existence is eternal, declaring this as the truth, whereby all other views are absolutely wrong? So basically, he's now behaving like an attorney in court. Do you swear to be saying all, the truth and nothing but the truth and all that jazz? As if this is going to help Poṭṭhapāda with his suffering, or even with his original question as to how is it that perception ceases in the higher states of, attainment in meditation. Has nothing to do with that. So now this is basically what the whole group of debaters were after. They wanted Lord Buddha to engage with them by answering these 10 questions. And they were really upset and annoyed every single time when Lord Buddha would just push these 10 aside. So they would always hope, though. They would always hope. Because once you respond to one, now you've opened up a Pandora's box. If you said yes is one problem, if you said no, it's another problem. While the person is sitting in their cesspit, suffering. Lord Buddha responds, Poṭṭhapāda, I neither claim that existence is eternal, nor do I categorically declare that as the truth, whereby all other views declaring otherwise would be absolutely wrong. Therefore, that question itself I have left aside as unexplained and thus undeclared. This will drive a philosopher nuts. This will drive a person who loves debating off the wall. They will not know what to do with this because it's all about ego. Academicians hate this. They say, no, you have to give me a response. Well, that is a response. Go home with it. Put it under your pillow. Rest easy. Go on and move on with your life and really start practicing, because none of these things are going to help. Now, he's so, as they say, incorrigible. Well, how about declaring existence not to be eternal? Therefore, do you state categorically that existence is not eternal? So first is it in the affirmative, is it eternal? And now, is it not eternal? Declaring this as the truth, whereby all other views are absolutely wrong. Again, Lord Buddha's response is the same. I do not claim that existence is not eternal, etc., etc. So I'm going to jump through these. I'm going to just mention them briefly. Again, all this, the PDFs of these are found on the website. Please go and read them at your own pace. But I'm going to give you the gist of it and go just touch upon each of these. Again, he jumps to the third one. In that case, Bhante, do you declare that existence is in fact limited and not boundless, meaning finite? Do you state categorically that existence is in fact limited and not boundless, declaring this to be the truth? Because that's what people would do. This is it. There's nothing else that's correct. I am correct. And that's how people were gathering around them tons and tons of followers and prestige. And to this day, this is not an Indian thing or a cultural thing. This is a human thing. Pathetic, even. Poṭṭhapāda, I do not claim that existence is in fact limited and not boundless, etc. He says, I left this as on the side. I never declared it. Well, Bhante, do you declare that existence is in fact boundlessly eternal? So now he takes the opposite. He's not getting it. So he wants to make sure that he's covering all 10 points, even though he's not getting the drift. He's not getting Lord Buddha's point that if he has left only one of them aside, why would he even go through the trouble of answering the other 9? Because they're all philosophical. They have nothing to do with life. They have nothing to do with the practice. They have nothing to do with the reduction of one's own suffering. So he goes like this. How about this, Bhante? Do you declare the soul and the body as being one and the same? Even though Lord Buddha answered his question on Atman, on the self, he's still asking like a robot. In that case, so Lord Buddha says, no, I've left that aside. Do you declare that the soul as being one thing and the body another? So are they different? Lord Buddha gives him the same response. Then, Bhante, do you declare that the Tathāgata lives on after death? In other words, do you state categorically that the Tathāgata exists and lives on after death, declaring this as the truth, whereby all other views stating otherwise would be absolutely wrong? Lord Buddha gives him the same answer. I left this unexplained and undeclared and pushed it aside. Now, the problem is, a bigger problem than these questions, having these questions, is that we've had idiots who are today world religious, founders of religions, who have come forward when they were asked these same questions, contemporaries of Lord Buddha's. One of them, Mahavir, or Nigāntanātaputta, the giant leader, who today still is worshipped. They answered to these questions categorically. These phrases are coming from them. I declare to be the truth and every other view is wrong. That statement comes from characters like Mahavir, who stated, yes, the Tathāgata lives on after death, for example. So when you say that, you make the other person stay in ignorance. In other words, feel comfortable in the status quo. When you do not declare something as definitive, that makes people feel uneasy, because things could go either way or not. We don't know. I don't know. And it's a very uncomfortable place, the I don't know. You look at the news, you look at any news article, any declaration of something a politician makes, everybody wants to make a categorical statement, and they're all beating around the bush. Nobody's saying what is supposed to be said. Nobody's addressing the real problem. Something happens, and I know in America, in the US, if something happens, something wrong happens and people will get hurt, usually the first thing they do is they look for a culprit. They want to put the blame on someone. Like in the 2008, crash and the housing market, and tens of millions of people lost their homes. None of the bankers who were responsible for that debacle, ended up in jail. Not a single one. Other people were blamed. The regular people were actually blamed. The people who wanted the houses, place to stay. So this is not like a stretch here, but no, this is we like to put the blame on someone instead of looking at the causal factors, which this whole path is all about. And Lord Buddha is saying, stop looking for categorical statements from me on these stupid issues. I've left them undeclared for a reason, because they don't help. Now he's still going to continue. Says, but what do you declare that the Tathāgata does not live on after death? So it's very infantile. Lord Buddha says the same thing. The Tathāgata does not both lives and does not live on after death. Lord Buddha says the same. How about the Tathāgata neither lives nor does not live on after death? And Lord Buddha says, Poṭṭhapāda, I do not claim that the Tathāgata neither lives nor does not live on after death, nor do I categorically declare that as the truth, whereby all other views that state otherwise would be absolutely wrong. Therefore, that question itself I have left aside as unexplained and thus undeclared. When this was said, Poṭṭhapāda again asked the Blessed One, but Bhante, why has the Blessed One not declared these questions and instead chose to leave them aside unanswered? So you can tell now he's frustrated, along with the other 300 who are sitting there fuming, because he's the only person who's asking questions. The reason for that, because he was their leader. The reason for that, Poṭṭhapāda, is that none of these are truly helpful, beneficial, or even relevant to be living the spiritual life, because they do not address the goal of the holy life, nor fundamentally are related. Therefore, none of those 10 questions are connected in any way to the Dhamma. And why is that? It is because, Poṭṭhapāda, none of those questions lead to disenchantment, Nibbāna, to dispassion, viraga, and to the certain fading away of the defilements in one's heart. By getting an answer like that, it's not going to make you develop suddenly passionlessness or dispassion, or the having those passions and lust and the hot emotions in your heart to be faded away because you have been given an answer. To the contrary, actually, you now will have another question popping up. Nothing is relieved, is there? Therefore, none of them lead to cessation, nirodha, to the complete ending of agitation and the attainment of inner peace, to direct and unmistakable knowledge and higher understanding, to full awakening, to Nibbāna supreme. So none of these questions you're asking me, these 10, will take you to Nibbāna, Lord Buddha says. If that is so, Bhante, this is Poṭṭhapāda, then what has the Blessed One declared? What does the Blessed One assert and explain categorically? For certain, what do you assert? Poṭṭhapāda, I have explained and do declare categorically these 4. This is suffering, is what I have categorically declared and do explain. This is the cause and arising of suffering, is what I have categorically declared and do explain. This is the ending of suffering, is what I have categorically declared and do explain. This is the path that leads to the ending and cessation of suffering, is what I have categorically declared and do explain. If you just remember these 4, you're fine. You don't need to study anything else in the Dhamma, if this is all you can study. And this will take you straight to Nibbāna. That's what Lord Buddha is saying. Because it will bring about disenchantment in you. You're going to see that there's other factors here that I'm not considering. Such as, why am I suffering? People don't seem to ask that question. They're looking for things outside, perceptions. They're seeking out ways to gain an answer about something intellectually, perceiving some answer somewhere, looking for it in books, instead of having a moment of sati, having a moment of honest living and looking at what it is they're going through. You're going to find their arrogance. You're going to find their ignorance, willful ignoring, right? Avidya. Every moment of asati or ayoniso manasikara, mindlessness or wrong attention, is a moment of willful ignoring. Ignoring of what? Ignoring of wisdom. Ignoring of what it is that is really happening. You're ignoring the paticca samuppada. You're ignoring causality. You're ignoring your own contribution to your own suffering. That's what it means. And why, Bhante, he asks? May I ask, has the Blessed One declared these points categorically? They have been declared, Poṭṭhapāda, because they unmistakably lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, and to the certain fading away of the defilements in one's heart. Boom, it's so concrete, it's so full. Therefore, they lead to cessation, to the complete ending of agitation and the attainment of inner peace, to direct and unmistakable knowledge and higher understanding, to full awakening, to Nibbāna supreme, period. This is not open for interpretation. This is clear. All of those 10 points, the undeclared points, they don't do anything. They could be taken, torn apart this way and that. Everybody could have a different view on it. But here, Lord Buddha is giving us very concrete, definitive, packed, solid, undeniable statement as to what it is, that it's, what is its purpose? What does it do for us if we are to follow these 4 noble truths? That Poṭṭhapāda is therefore the reason why I have declared them categorically. So you have declared, O Blessed One. So you have declared indeed, O well gone one, O Sugata. Bhante, if you have other matters to attend to, then please do not feel compelled to stay here with us further. May the Blessed One do whatever he sees fit. And the Blessed One arose from his seat and left the debating hall. So it's like, so who won? That's what the debaters want to know. Who won? Who won the argument? That's why it's called a debating hall, right? Lord Buddha just turned the table on them. It just completely shocked them. They're like in a disarray. And usually, just like in the case that I was mentioning about people wanting to blame someone, guess what happens to Poṭṭhapāda? That's coming up next. The heading I've chosen for this section is The Disgruntled Wandering Ascetics Criticize Poṭṭhapāda. Right after the Blessed One had left, being upset at Poṭṭhapāda, the wandering ascetics began barraging him with insults as they harshly criticized him. Thus, from all sides, they began shouting their angry remarks while surrounding Poṭṭhapāda and verbally abusing him thus. This Poṭṭhapāda surely seems to approve of all that the recluse Gotama stated. In fact, whatever Gotama was saying, you kept agreeing with it and rejoicing in hearing while saying, so you have declared, O Blessed One, so you have declared indeed, O well gone one. Don't you realize that none of the 10 questions you asked were answered properly or categorically by the recluse Gotama? He neither declared nor held a clear position that is categorical. So here they repeat the whole 10 questions, which I'm not going to go into again. But Poṭṭhapāda, in turn, snapped back at them by saying, yes, I also did not see that any of those 10 questions I asked were answered properly or categorically. But surely you could see that the recluse Gotama does in fact lay down a true, and from what it sounds, an effective and factual path of practice, a statute of the Dhamma, an unmistakable and undeniable standard of and for the Dhamma, which no one could argue. So he's now making sense. This is a legitimate, comeback. He's saying, well, you're wrong because of these factors. So he's making a good point. Gautama Buddha, the recluse Gautama, they would call him, is making a valid point. He's being categorical about those 4, not the 10, because they really don't help. Yeah, I see it. Therefore, when the recluse Gautama is laying down a true and, from what it sounds, an effective and factual path of practice, a statute of the Dhamma, an unmistakable and undeniable standard of and for the Dhamma, then how could I, as a rational and intelligent man, continue to speak against it? Or how could I try and disapprove the well-spoken words of the recluse Gautama, attempting to find fault in them, or deny the fact that they are indeed well-spoken? So you guys are just coming at me with your just upset emotions. You're not even making sense. You're like children attacking me without thinking it through as to what just happened. He made sense. You simply want to argue and debate with him for no reason. If we are really practicing, then we should be after the truth. And he gave us his truth at least. So I'm not going to argue with that. So this section of the sutta, which is the last major section, its title is Chitta Hati Sariputta and Poṭṭhapāda Visit the Blessed One. Hati Sariputta doesn't mean related with Venerable Sariputta, by the way. Sariputta means the son of Sari, but in this case, it's the elephant trainer Sari, and it's a male Sari. Sariputta, in the case of Venerable Sariputta, his mother's name was Sari. So anyhow, then 2 or 3 days later, Chitta Hati Sariputta, the son of the elephant trainer, and the wandering ascetic Poṭṭhapāda both came to visit the Blessed One. And after paying their respects, the two sat to one side. Once the friendly greetings were over, Poṭṭhapāda addressed the Blessed One and began giving a report as to what ensued right after the Blessed One had left the debating hall during the last encounter. Thus, Poṭṭhapāda spoke by saying, Bhante, the other day, right after the Blessed One had left, the wandering ascetics, being upset at me, began barraging me with insults. So he gives a report and all that. In response, Bhante, I snapped back at them by saying, etc. So he says whatever he said. We just went over. Then the Blessed One said, Poṭṭhapāda, all those wanderers of other sects are truly blind and lacking vision. Only you have the capacity to inquire and see, being eager for still more learning and understanding. Hence, you alone have eyes, compared to those blind people, to consider, appreciate, and see what I was teaching there. After all, Poṭṭhapāda, there are Dhammas that I have declared and laid down non-categorically, and there are also Dhammas which I have preached and laid down categorically. And what are the Dhammas, teachings that I have declared and laid down non-categorically? Whereas other teachers have made emphatic and conclusive statements, such as claiming that existence is eternal, this is the truth, thus all other views are absolutely wrong, and he lists all those 10 undeclared questions. I, on the other hand, Lord Buddha continues, again, I'm abbreviating those sections because it's a repeat, laid all those questions aside and treated them with non-categorical statements, leaving them undeclared. And why is that, Poṭṭhapāda? It is because, Poṭṭhapāda, none of those questions lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to the certain fading away of the defilements in one's heart. Therefore, none of them lead to cessation, to the complete ending of agitation and the attainment of inner peace, to direct and unmistakable knowledge and higher understanding, to full awakening to Nibbāna supreme. And what, Poṭṭhapāda, are those Dhammas that I have taught and laid down categorically? Poṭṭhapāda, I have explained and do declare categorically these 4. This is suffering. This is the cause and arising of suffering. This is the ending of suffering, and this is the path that leads to the ending of cessation of suffering. And Lord Buddha says, repeats that section, that Poṭṭhapāda is therefore the reason why I have declared them categorically. Poṭṭhapāda, there are some recluses and Brahmins who actually believe, declare, and entertain such a view as this. After death, the self comes to enjoy a complete and an absolutely delightful state of unmixed bliss, while remaining healthy, free of any and all disease, and full of vigor throughout. So I approach them and ask, is it true that you declare and hold on to such a view as this? They say, yes. Then I ask them, have you had the actual experience or live by knowing and seeing a world of absolute and exclusively unmixed bliss through and through? They reply, no. So Lord Buddha is asking, you who declare this, I would like to know, have you experienced what you are talking about, what you're describing so much in detail? And they say, no. Then I ask them, have you ever, even for a single night or a single day, or even half a night or even half a day, experienced an absolutely all blissful self? They say, no. Then I ask them, in that case, do you have any first-hand knowledge or experience whereby you could so emphatically declare, this is the path, this is the practice for seeing? with one's own eyes that absolutely all blissful and happy world? They respond by saying, no. Then I ask them further, well, have you heard the voices of any devas reborn in some all blissful world who go on saying, friends, be well established on the path, be uprightly established on the path, for seeing with your own eyes a world so delightful and all blissful, as we, on our part, friends, the devas, are reborn in an all blissful and delightful world with such a path of practice? And to this, they also reply and say, no. So he's asking him, okay, you haven't had any experience. You ever, basically, although you're saying this is the case, this is what really is waiting for you, there is this all blissful state where there's nothing other than bliss. Nothing. You're talking about it. Have you experienced it? No. How about the devas? Have you ever heard the sounds of devas talking to you, describing to you, telling you that, yes, we now live in such a realm where it's all bliss through and through? And the man says, no. Now, what do you think, Poṭṭhapāda? If that is their position, then doesn't it make the categorical statements and indemonstrable assertions of those recluses and Brahmins utterly baseless, exposing how those declarations, in all actuality, lack any credibility or foundation? Absolutely, Bhante. That does, in fact, make the categorical statements and assertions of those recluses and Brahmins utterly baseless, exposing how those declarations, in all actuality, lack any credibility or foundation indeed. So, what are you basing it on? Here we get a simile from Lord Buddha. Simile of the non-existent woman. Imagine, Poṭṭhapāda, that there was a man who kept saying and declaring to the world, I am in love with the most beautiful and exquisitely stunning woman in the world. I only want to be with her. I desire no other woman but her. Then those people around him would begin to ask, good man, do you know which clan or family she is from? He responds by saying, I do not know. Then they ask, well, do you know her name? Again, he responds and says, I do not know. How about her features? Do you know whether she is tall or short, or whether she is fair-skinned or dark-skinned? How about the color of her hair? Is it dark, brown, or gray? He responds by saying, I do not know. Then they ask him, in that case, do you know which village or town she lives in? But again, he replies by saying, no, I do not know. Then they would turn to him and retort, so you're saying that you're in love with someone you've never met, seen, or know where she is from, which village she lives in, nor what her features are. Yet you claim her to be the most beautiful and exquisitely stunning woman in the world, that you only want to be with her and desire no other woman but her. And he replies by saying, yes, I am. Now, what do you think, Poṭṭhapāda? Wouldn't you then say that the statements that that man was making amount to nothing? Don't his assertions turn out to be utterly baseless, exposing those declarations he is making in all actuality to be lacking any credibility or foundation? Absolutely, Bhante. That does in fact make the statements made by that man amount to nothing, where his assertions turn out to be utterly baseless, exposing those declarations he is making in all actuality to be lacking any credibility or foundation. So imagine you're saying, I'm in love with that person. Yes, yes. Okay, who is that person? Do you know her eye shape or color or her features? Where is she from? What's her last name? How many brothers and sisters she had? Does she have a mother and father? Who's her uncle? Nope, nope, nope. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. What's her name? I don't know. How can anyone take you seriously? The same is the case, Poṭṭhapāda, with the categorical statements and indemonstrable assertions of those recluses and Brahmins who go on declaring after death, the self comes to enjoy a complete and an absolutely delightful state of unmixed bliss while remaining healthy, free of any and all disease and full of vigor throughout. It's like those funerals that people go to. Yes, mom is right now up there sitting on the right side of God and she's happy. And yes, Uncle George is over there and he's now, in heavenly bliss. How do you have that information? How did you get it? Did he text you? Did he email you? All of their emphatically made assertions remain utterly baseless, exposing those declarations in all actuality to be lacking any credibility or foundation. You have entire religions making so much, bank for thousands of years. Politicians are the same. They're just following their example. But Lord Buddha doesn't stop there. Simile of the staircase to the non-existent mansion. Imagine, Poṭṭhapāda, that there is a man standing at the junction points of 4 roads, busy at work trying to build a staircase, a ladder that he claims to be used to climb up a mansion. Now all those passers-by who witness him at work begin to ask, "Good man, this mansion you speak of, for which you are busily building this staircase, which way is it located?" To which he responds by saying, "I do not know." They then ask further, "Well, is it to the east or to the west, or is it to the south or to the north?" Again he responds and says, "I do not know." They then ask him, "Well, do you know whether this mansion is very high or low in structure?" Again he responds by saying, "I do not know." Inquiring further, they ask him, "Well, have you actually seen the mansion for which you are building this staircase?" Again he responds and says, "I do not know." Then those people would simply turn to him and retort, "So you're saying that you're standing here in the middle of the junction point of the 4 main roads, cross section, busy at work, trying to build a staircase to a mansion that you've never seen? A mansion that you do not know as to which direction it is located, whether to the east, south, north, west, nor do you know its dimensions, whether it's high or low in its structure, yet you insist on putting up a ladder that you claim is to be used for climbing up that mansion?" And the man replies by saying, "Yes, I am." Now, what do you think, Poṭṭhapāda? Wouldn't you then say that the statements that man was making amount to nothing? Don't his assertions turn out to be utterly baseless, exposing the declarations he's making in all actuality to be lacking any credibility or foundation? Absolutely, Bhante. So that portion is again repeated. This time for this example, this simile, metaphor that Lord Buddha used about the man who's building a staircase to nowhere, basically. After death, the self, so these people, he says, who go on telling people that there is this delightful realm where there is unmixed by non-bliss. So it's only bliss. You will not find any Deva realm where there is all the time bliss. That's why Lord Buddha asked, "Have you ever heard any Deva tell you that?" Who are they? Those Devas that are apparently reporting to you that there is such a realm. And he's like, "There's none. I never heard of any." Then why are you claiming that there is such a place? Lord Buddha's asking, making such categorical statements. You haven't experienced them. You haven't seen it. You don't know of such a place, but you are declaring it. Like these people who say liberty for all. You have in France, they have liberté, fraternité, etc. Like fraternity, liberty. What is liberty? Or justice. What is that? People talk about it. They go to war. They kill millions of people in the name of, yes, we're going to bring harmony, we're going to bring peace. And what is peace? These guys are making bombs. They're making profit. These huge governments that keep on sending their troops to bring peace while unloading their weaponry on these poor people. Millions of the people die. So they have no idea of peace, fraternity, love, liberty, justice, yet they claim. Same thing with religious characters for thousands of years. these beliefs. With the sword, I'm going to bring justice. With the sword, I'm going, what? Lord Buddha says, if you use the sword on someone, that sword is going to come at you. You're going to be cut by it, by the same act of causing harm to another. It's going to be done to you. Somehow that evades them while they make the profits, of course. Now, the next section is 3 types of self-acquisition. Atta pati labha. So here is where Lord Buddha can get into Poṭṭhapāda's brain more, I can't say effectively, but in a way that Poṭṭhapāda could perhaps understand better, because he's very much fond of Atman. Remember his first question about self? So here Lord Buddha is saying about the 3 types of self-acquisition. What is meant by that in this Dhamma and discipline? Poṭṭhapāda, there are these 3 types of self-acquisition. The acquisition of a gross self, the acquisition of mind-made self, and the acquisition of a formless self. And what is the acquisition of a gross self? Here, one comes to possess a form and a shape, comprised of the 4 great primaries, while being sustained by mouthfuls of ingestible food. This itself is what is meant by the acquisition of a gross or physical self. If you notice, this is what Poṭṭhapāda, in a sense, but Lord Buddha, like a caring parent, is going in, like a caring, loving teacher, is saying, come over here, come over here. Your misconception or your misconstrued ideas about the self, we can approach it this way. Instead of like another teacher who would take the cane and start beating little old Johnny because he misrepresented or he used different words, a good teacher will come in and use a language that little old Johnny could understand, but the teacher with versatility will come to shape it in a different way, but using the words that little kid, or in this case Poṭṭhapāda, used. This is what a teacher does. A teacher will take you from the state of avidya that you're in, the language, the wrong perceptions, wrong ideas, and they will start to carefully, if you have the true desire for the Dhamma, that is, if they see that in you, they will put the effort, go out of their way to assist the student to slowly, slowly pull them out of their ignorance. And that's what Lord Buddha is doing. And what is the acquisition of a mind-made body? Remember, the Poṭṭhapāda said, oh, that's not what I meant, Bhante. I meant a mind-made body or self as the self. Here, Poṭṭhapāda, one comes to possess a form and a shape, but one that is conceived of and made by mind. A body which has all its major and minor limbs, with all its senses functioning. This itself is what is meant by the acquisition of a mind-made self. Remember a few weeks ago we covered the Chulapantaka Sutta, where Venerable Chulapantaka created 1,000 copies of himself. They were not mental conjurings in Venerable Chulapantaka's mind. They were real. That's why the messenger who was sent by Jivaka and Lord Buddha for getting the Venerable Chulapantaka to come join them for the lunch dana, he was startled to find 1,000 bhikkhus, in fact, exact copies of Venerable Chulapantaka, roaming around in the monastery, doing different tasks. They were visible, they were alive, they were sweating, they were making sounds every time they were hauling something heavy. They were moving. And as they moved, dust would come off from the ground. So they were real. So that's what Lord Buddha is saying, mind-made. They were made by mind. And that's why when the messenger came back again and he said, who's Venerable Chulapantaka? And following the advice of Lord Buddha, the first hand that went up was the real Chulapantaka. And the messenger quickly grabbed Venerable Chulapantaka's robe, as Lord Buddha had indicated, directed. And what happened? All the other 1,000 Chulapantakas disappeared. These are not, things that are just mumbo jumbo type things. No, these are real with the power of the mind. But Lord Buddha is saying that, it's not ultimate. It's just, mind-made self, if you want to call it self. And what is the acquisition of a formless self? Here, Poṭṭhapāda, one is formless, possessing no form or shape, that is entirely the product of and consisting of perceptions. This itself is what is meant by the acquisition of a formless self. This is what happens in the arupa jhanas. When a person has worked on the arupa jhanas and dies, having made that type of a jhana, arupa jhana, their everything, they're attached to it, meaning they hold on to it. That's their refuge. That's their, safety. All the time they go there, they enjoy it. They look forward to it. Then when the moment comes, because of their attachments to such a state, they will be reborn into that formless realm. There's gradations of it, of course. Like the one that we were talking about last week and the weeks prior about the 8th jhana, neither perception nor non-perception realm, where the person who is reborn there, like the case was with Uddhakarama-putta, Siddhartha Gautama's last teacher before he left them. When he died, he had been reborn in that realm, which made him inaccessible even for Lord Buddha to go and teach him, because he wouldn't have the ability. It's the refined state of formless realm. So it's not something to write home about, as they say. Now, Lord Buddha is going to address these acquisitions. The Dhamma addresses the self-acquisitions, the 3 kinds. Giving up the gross self. So Lord Buddha here is inviting Poṭṭhapāda to relinquish his wrong view about the self, starting with the gross acquisition of the self, the first of which he listed. Poṭṭhapāda, it is for the complete abandoning and giving up of the gross acquisition of the self that I teach the Dhamma. That's a categorical statement. So exact, so clear, like laser, unmistakable. And continues, according to which, through training, your defiling and corrupting mental states will be given up and abandoned. In their stead, purifying mental states will develop in you, whereby through your own efforts, you will come to directly realize, and with your higher knowledge, abhiññā, the very perfection and fulfillment of wisdom here and now will take place as you abide in it in this very life. This is in contrast to what that so-called teacher was saying. There's this blissed out realm where you go after your death, or here Lord Buddha is again and again talking to you for addressing your own efforts in making sure that you get to experience this state, this purifying state right now in this very life, and remain in it. So you don't have to ask somebody else about it. You're the experiencer of it. Now, Poṭṭhapāda, you might be thinking, but although defiling and corrupting mental states will be given up and abandoned, and in their stead purifying mental states may develop in me, whereby I would come to directly realize myself, and with my higher knowledge, the very perfection and fulfillment of wisdom here and now, and abide in it in this very life. And yet, such a life would still be essentially suffering, wouldn't it, or would it not? But that would not be a healthy way of understanding that what is being taught here, Poṭṭhapāda. Therefore, it would indeed be helpful to you if you were to look at what is being taught here and comprehend it instead in this manner. One can be forgiven here to read these words and to perhaps guess whether Lord Buddha is using his ability to read Poṭṭhapāda's mind. Because Poṭṭhapāda might be saying in his mind, based on what Lord Buddha said, probably he's very much thinking that. Poṭṭhapāda is thinking that, well, wait a minute. Recluse, but recluse Gautama just said the Four Noble Truths. But this is not the ultimate. But ultimately, isn't there suffering? And how is that getting rid of the suffering part? So Lord Buddha says, don't think like that. Because you will directly see and experience such a life as indeed blissful, not because someone else has told you about it, but because of your own experiencing of the undeniable spiritual joy, along with the tranquility of mind that it brings, with genuine mindfulness and full awareness, whereby you will know it for yourself and taste the reality of your happiness and thus dwell in it. So please do not underestimate the changes that are going to take place in you thanks to this effort that you're putting. So this is where that English saying of, the journey, not the destination. That's where, everything lies in the journey. It's not the goal. It's not the last, finish line. If you're just thinking about that, well, you kind of missed it. It's the whole journey that makes the whole point of it for the person. So here too, there's a transformation taking place in the person. So he's saying, don't think, as a intellectual does, pure intellectual, without realizing the alterations that are happening in you. Your behavior, for starters, your sila is much better than you were before. You're purifying yourself, parisuddhiya. You're purifying yourself. You walk home, you come home, you're inside, you close the door, and you walk around the kitchen, or you look at your emails or something, and something happens and you're about to say something, or you're on the call with some friend, and you're about to say something, or they say something, and your response turns out to be something different than what you usually would say. You will stay away from saying that cuss word or talking about vulgarities. Why are they now suddenly vulgarities? Because your practice has helped you to clean up more and more every day. That's part of the journey. The things that would lend you to be more arrogant, let's say, or show offy, or hey, look at me, look at me, look at me type of a tendency, day by day start to disappear. And then a year later, you meet someone who somehow had fallen off the friendship circle for you, but with whom you were best friends. And you look at them and they're talking and you're like, oh, where's this person coming from? I can't stand this. Well, you used to stand this for 17 years together. What happened? Your practice happened. So yes, suffering is there, Poṭṭhapāda, Lord Buddha is saying, but do not minimize the changes that are already happening. Again, if you recall that phrase that I repeated again this time in the beginning today, Anupubbā kiriya, anupubbā sikkha, anupubbā patipada. Progressional is progressive, rather gradual. You're changing. We speak a language. Well, that didn't happen overnight. Now, as an adult, you use proper grammar, you use proper terms, proper tenses, intonations, all these things, pronunciations. That didn't happen overnight. We tweak them, mold them, chisel them. Giving up the mind-made self, that's the second section. So Lord Buddha's responding to what is the Dhamma's position in regards to these self-acquisitions. He just addressed the gross body self. Now he's talking about the mind-made self. Similarly, Poṭṭhapāda, it is for the complete abandoning and giving up of the mind-made self that I teach the Dhamma, according to which, through training, your defiling and corrupting mental states will be given up and abandoned. In their stead, purifying mental states will develop in you, whereby through your own efforts you will come to directly realize, and with your own higher knowledge, the very perfection and fulfillment of wisdom here and now, and abide in it in this very life. Now, Poṭṭhapāda, you might be thinking, so again, he says this same thing again, but through Poṭṭhapāda's voice, that, well, yeah, but what about suffering? It would still be there, would it not? And Lord Buddha will give him the same response for that as well, because it's the mind-made. So ultimately, what we need to be understanding from this section here is that we don't need to listen to anyone else. Ultimately, it is your experience of it. It is the truth of the experience that you are having. Pacchatang veditabbo vinyuhi. That is one of the qualities of the Dhamma. What it means is, the Dhamma is to be realized by the wise for themselves. You don't need to believe me. You don't need to believe this other bhikkhu, that Bhante, this teacher, that Ajahn, that Sayadaw, somebody, or even the Lord Buddha. Ultimately. Otherwise, you would just be another worshiper. Worshipper of words, worshipper of suttas, worshipper, meaning completely detached from the teaching. The Dhamma is alive, however. But where is it alive? Where can it be alive? Can it be alive in the heart of your teacher? If it is, who cares? Ultimately, it has to be alive in your heart. That's the only place that the Dhamma could stay alive, not in someone else's heart. It has to be realized by you, not someone else. Who cares? I mean, ultimately, who cares? Lord Buddha had attained the arahantship. Okay, so did countless others. Okay, fine, wonderful. So this teaching is standing on solid ground as far as a proper lineage is concerned. That part, okay, wonderful, beautiful. But what does it mean for me in my life and my dealing with suffering? My working on my progress. And now Lord Buddha is addressing the formless self, giving up the formless self. In the same manner, Poṭṭhapāda, it is for the complete abandoning and giving up of the formless self that I teach the Dhamma, according to which, through training, your defiling and corrupting mental states will be given up and abandoned. In their stead, purifying mental states will develop in you, whereby through your own efforts you will come to realize, and with your higher knowledge, the very perfection and fulfillment of wisdom here and now, and abide in it in this very life. And Lord Buddha repeats that section. Well, what if, does this get rid of suffering, knowing this? And Lord Buddha responds back by saying, you shouldn't be thinking like this, because you will directly see, after all, and experience such a life as indeed blissful, not because someone else has told you about it, but because of your own experiencing of the undeniable spiritual joy, along with the tranquility of mind that it brings, with genuine mindfulness and full awareness, whereby you will know it for yourself and taste the reality of your happiness, and thus dwell in it. So here, okay, let's continue this section too, just because there's the counterpart simile that Lord Buddha uses that I want us to address, and then we'll see if we can stop. Now, why the self-acquisitions are given up? And if Poṭṭhapāda, we were to be asked by others, but friend, what is that acquisition of a gross self, for the complete abandoning and giving up of which you teach this Dhamma? Whereby through training, the defiling and corrupting mental states will be given up and abandoned in you, and in their stead, purifying mental states will develop in you. as you will, through your own efforts, come to directly realize, and with your own higher knowledge, the very perfection and fulfillment of wisdom here and now, and abide in it in this very life, then we respond to them with the explanation given to you, Poṭṭhapāda, as we answer. This gross body itself, friend, is what is meant by acquisition of a gross self, for the complete abandoning and giving up of which we teach this Dhamma. You're giving up this body. That, when we look at, in terms of Nibbāna, in terms of the state of arahantship specifically, what we're talking about is the ending of samsara. So Lord Buddha is saying, ultimately, cessation is going to have to lead you to that state where you do not take on, you do not acquire. There's no self-acquisition, starting with the gross form, Lord Buddha is saying. And that's where this teaching takes you, where you do not continue on in the rebirth cycle. Tell me that's not a practical piece of information. That's not a step-by-step guide. Of course it is. He's giving us the blueprint. He's giving us the know-how. He's giving us the tool set. Everything is going to, all we need to do is take those tools and start applying them in our lives. That's the only way, the only place we can apply them. And if Poṭṭhapāda, we were to be asked by others, but friend, what is the acquisition of mind-made self? Same response. And then if Poṭṭhapāda, we were asked about the acquisition of a formless self, for the complete abandoning and giving up of which you teach this Dhamma. This itself, friend, is what is meant by acquisition of a formless self, for the complete abandoning and giving up of which we teach the Dhamma. So you do not end up in a mind-made body in some deva realm, or even higher, arupa realm, where the lifetime is pretty long. 84,000 mahakalpas. That's a very, very, very long time. I think each mahakalpa, if you put it with a size 12 font, it will cover about several miles. I think somebody did. It came out to be 7 miles. Size 12 font, the zeros I'm talking about. 1 plus zeros. About 7 miles in distance, length. That's 1 mahakalpa. A long time. How many mothers and fathers and loved ones and etc. Big bangs coming and going, forming of the nebulas and stars and come and go. It's so tedious. It's endless. That's why it's called innumerable lifetimes. The innumerable term is not going to become a number, It's simply for the brain to handle such a prospect, which it cannot handle. And so it gives it the title infinity. And Lord Buddha comes in, and Dhamma comes in and says, no, don't make that mistake, because there is no such thing as infinity as far as numbers go. It might look like it, like the case is with Baka, the Brahma God, which is the sutta that I'm translating right now. He believed that he was it. Everybody is subordinate to his dominion, and he is eternal. And Lord Buddha comes in and says, no, because that is terrible. That level of illusion is really something else. But then there's the other realms, the arupa realms. The arupa realms are incredibly long, like the 84,000 I was just mentioning. Now, what do you think, Poṭṭhapāda? Would you say that the statements and assertions made here are well-founded, credible, demonstrable, and thus have a valid basis? Oh, yes, Bhante. Surely these statements and assertions made here are well-founded, credible, demonstrable, and thus have a valid basis. Indeed, O Blessed One. Simile of the staircase to the mansion. Imagine, Poṭṭhapāda, that there is a man standing on the ground floor in front of a mansion, busy at work, trying to build a staircase. a ladder that he states is to be used to climb up to the mansion's upper levels. Now all those passers-by who witness him at work begin to ask him, "Good man, this mansion you speak of, for which you are busily building the staircase, which way is it located? Is it to the east, or to the west, or to the south, or to the north?" To which he responds by saying, "Friends, here is the very mansion I speak of, for which I am building the staircase, as I stand here on the ground floor in front of the mansion of which I speak, busy at work trying to build the ladder that is to be used to climb up to the mansion's upper levels." You see it, it's right here. Now, what do you think, Poṭṭhapāda? Would you say that the statements made by that man are well-founded, credible, demonstrable, and thus have a valid basis? Oh, yes, Bhante. Surely those statements made by that man are well-founded, credible, demonstrable, and thus have a valid basis. Indeed. I will stop here. Well, let me finish this acquisition section. In the same manner, Poṭṭhapāda, when we are asked by others, so Lord Buddha is repeating this, and therefore, Poṭṭhapāda, would you say that our statements here are well-founded? And Poṭṭhapāda repeats. So we will continue, even though I was hoping to finish today, but I don't want to be rushing through it. It's not fair. I think even if it, yeah, 1.5 hours. Yeah, I would be rushing through it. I don't want to do that. It's not fair for the Dhamma and for this Avyākata Sutta. So we'll stop at Citta Hati Sariputta's questions, which we'll do next week. And it's an amazing sutta. It deserves respect, our respectful attention, and the application of it hopefully will be, yes, there are some philosophical points here and there, but they are relevant, and we make them relevant to our lives ultimately, right? So I will stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. Any thoughts, comments? Okay, I don't see any. All right, let's transfer some minutes. Akasatha Chabumata Dīgha Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Lokasasanam. Akasatha Chabumata Dīgha Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanam. Akasatha Chabumata Devanagamayitika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well. May your understanding deepen, and may your training, your practice continue growing and sending down its strong, powerful roots, and wisdom grow in an unprecedented fashion. May there be joy, love, prosperity in your life. May you take yourself with a little bit more ease and simplicity and much forgiveness. Much forgiveness. Until next time. Sukhiyot.